Welcome to Heroes Have Wings, the podcast that gives a voice to the unsung heroes of Army aviation. I'm your host, Jason Santiago. For the Army aviators, crew chiefs, and flight medics who put it all on the line in the heat of battle, this is their opportunity to share untold stories of courage, sacrifice, and unbreakable will. From their beginnings to the battlefield, you hear about their hardships, the moments of doubt, and how they overcame impossible odds to save lives. These warriors didn't just fight for survival, they put others above themselves, embodying the true spirit of heroism and selfless service. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Heroes Have Wings. Welcome to the very first episode of Heroes Have Wings, where we bring you untold stories of resilience, courage, and leadership from the battlefield to the boardroom. I'm your host, Jason Santiago. Today, we kick it off with none other than Sam Pemberton, a man who's walked the walk and now talks the talk of service, family, and leadership. This is not your average guest. Sam is an Army brat who lived all over the world, from Germany to Italy, Fort Bragg to Tampa, and that global experience shaped a leader who spent over 2 decades serving his country. First, he suited up in the Army from 2001 to 2011, then seamlessly transitioned into the Coast Guard from 2011 to 2022, where he earned title of Maritime Interdiction Officer of the Year in 2021. But his journey didn't end with the uniform coming off. No, Sam took his boots to the boardroom. Now he's a licensed real estate agent, director of community outreach, and an advocate for veterans, leading initiatives to give back to those who served on the front lines. Married 23 years, father of 3 incredible kids, and a lover of music who plays guitar in his downtime, Sam is not just a man of duty, but a man of passion. From his time on the battlefields to his current role, uplifting veterans and first responders through organizations like Combat Boots to Boardrooms and the Night Stalkers Association, Sam embodies the spirit of relentless service and community. He's here to share not only his highs of a decorated military career, but the lessons, hardships, and humor along the way. Trust me, you do not want to miss a second of this. Let's get into it. Sam Pemberton, welcome to Heroes Have Wings. What's up, Sam?
Jason, man, that was incredible. I appreciate that. That was above and beyond for sure.
Hey, we got to set the standard high when we start, so I just want to make sure everybody knows the high speed guy I have in front of me. All right.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Well, you did a great job. That was fantastic. I appreciate you. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Sam. All right, so what we normally do, just to break the ice, make sure you're nice and comfortable, we're going to play a little game. It's called Quick Hits. I'm going to shoot 2 things at you. You just pick one. There's 10 things, and then we'll go from there, all right? Biggest thing,
Okay.
just relax. All right, we're going to get started. Coffee or energy drinks?
Coffee.
Country life, city living?
Country life.
Summer heat, winter cold?
Winter cold.
Movies or books?
Movies.
Dog person or cat person?
Dog person. I was trying to get him to come in, but
okay,
I messed up. Sorry.
No, you good. Beach vacation or mountain retreat?
Oh, that's tough. Beach vacation just edges it out.
Okay. Wake up early or stay up late?
Stay up late for sure.
All right, perfect. Action movies or comedies?
Comedies.
Camping or road trip?
Road trip.
Texting or calling?
I like calls, but I feel like I get more communication or more response with texting when I just randomly text friends and family, all over. Yeah. So I'd have to say texting.
Okay. Like that. So essentially, Sam, what we're going to do next about hour and a half, 2 hours, I want the world to know who Sam Pemberton is. You played a pivotal role in my life in 2008. I don't know if you know that, but I know we've talked about it before. I know we talked about it at your retirement. I came down to Jacksonville to support you. but you played a very pivotal role in my life. I want you to know that as a young aviator. I remember showing up to Alpha Company in 2006. You got there in 2008 while we are in Afghanistan, and you were a sight for sore eyes. And just the way your calm presence about you, your leadership ability, it just resonated me from to this day. And you're one person that played a very profound impact on me. So I just want the world to know who you are. We're going to talk about everything from early childhood to where you're at now. You have any questions for me, please just don't hesitate to ask, and I'm here to just tell your story, okay?
I appreciate that. You're too kind. Thanks. Thanks.
All right, so first off, early life. I saw in your intro you lived all over the world. Just give us a quick introduction of where you were born, where'd you start off?
Yeah. So I had a really good childhood. My dad
Nice.
was in the army, and my dad and mom were raised us in a Christian home, and that kind of laid a foundation for my faith and what I ultimately believe is my life successes are based on my childhood.
Yeah.
You know, not a lot of people are as fortunate to live in a household where there isn't divorce or abuse or substance abuse or physical abuse. I had a great childhood. Born in Germany, and then kind of like the pinnacle of my childhood was probably when we had an opportunity to live in Panama for almost 3 years, right after Noriega got ousted.
Yeah.
I learned to surf. I learned to surf in the Pacific Ocean. I learned to scuba dive in the Atlantic Ocean at 12 years old, and it was in retrospect, it probably shaped a lot of who I became, like adventurer, kind of extrovert.
Yeah.
Um, Played sports year round.
Hmm.
Was soccer was my lifetime sport. Football was something I really liked to do too. Learned to play tennis,
Okay.
which I still like to play tennis today. And so
Well,
yeah, so really good childhood
yeah.
for sure.
Let me ask you, with you being a military child, how did that shape you now to be number one, a leader, and just to deal with different types of people? Because I know how it is. We move, we meet different people.
Yeah,
It's a very
yeah,
it's a very intriguing thing. So how did that shape you at a young age that you're moving all over the place? How did that help you today?
huge. So being able to like adapt to different personalities, as I think a strong trait I have right now,
Yeah.
um, with being in real estate. But I kind of got that honed in the military while I was active duty, and that first came about when I was going to a new school every year,
Mm,
almost, or sometimes two a year, sometimes
yeah.
three a year, and I remember thinking like, okay, I remember going to having a first day of school and be like, okay, what kind of personality do I want to be here? Like I had the chance to change, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly when we lived at Fort Hood. I was there for two different tours, but the last tour my dad was stationed there for was a long time. It was from '86 to '90, so it was 4 years.
Wow.
I was between like 7 and 11,
Okay.
and New Kids on the Block was my jam.
Yeah,
Right, New
I
Kids on
remember
the
that.
Block
Yeah.
was super popular. It
Yep.
was like it was my jam. And then our stuff got shipped to Panama. We moved to Panama, and immediately I could tell like being a fan of New Kids on the Block was not cool. It was not the cool thing to do. But when the movers came, they pulled. I had one of those big desk hutches with a bulletin board, and I
Yeah.
had all this New Kids on the Block stuff
Yeah.
like like pinned up against it. And they're pulling it out of the van, and I'm with all my friends, and they look at me like, is that your stuff? I was like, no, man, that's old. That's old. It was probably 6 weeks. It was
Yeah.
probably 6 weeks ago that I had that in my room.
Yeah.
So I guess adaptability, um, basically, the ability to adapt to my environment is,
Yeah.
is something that I uh, learned as a kid very early on, very quickly,
Do you feel like you had
for
to be
sure.
a chameleon? You know, a chameleon they could change their skin no matter where they're at, and they could blend in anywhere. Do you feel like you essentially developed that over during your childhood?
I do, yeah. And I didn't think about that much at the time. Obviously,
Hmm.
when you're going through it,
Yeah.
you don't think about that. And then even in the Army and in the Coast Guard, I didn't really think about that was something that was aiding me along my way. But what it essentially did, Jason, is I think it allowed me to adapt my um, the people around me to maybe meet expectations that somebody had of me that might not have been the same as
Yeah.
somebody else. And so like being able to pivot in that way isn't a big deal for me. And that's today too. Like I have some clients that are extremely detail oriented and only want to see a house with X, Y, and Z. And I have some that are very free spirits
Yep.
that they're like, yeah, that when the house comes to me and I have to be able to be an advocate for both of those personalities, and it doesn't really bother me.
Yeah.
Some agents they have their regiment,
Hmm.
and some leaders have their regiment that they expect everybody else to kind of adhere to them. And I immediately realized, and I think my dad was a big part of that.
Yeah.
Um,
So
well,
let me ask you
that's a whole nother
about your
story.
dad real quick. What did he do in the
Yeah,
army?
he was a combat engineer. He the first half of his career before the Berlin Wall fell, and he was involved in atomic demolitions
Yeah.
as a like the plan to blow up bridges in Germany,
Yeah.
basically for the Russian horde to come across the Fulda Gap. So his role was very specific and very technical and highly nuclear.
Yeah.
And then after the 89 in 1990, what got us to Panama was he became a light fighter. So he was still in
Mm.
construction, demolition, but he joined a jungle warfare light fighter group as a platoon sergeant down there. And what was cool about growing up in as an army brat, like we weren't on the sidelines. We lived in base housing everywhere. We went to all the company parties. We
Yeah.
went to and I was surrounded by a bunch of soldiers and family members and dependents like me that it was normal to move every 2 to 3 years. It was normal to have temporary friendships and know that, we're going to be friends for a long time and I might not see you again, but when you're a kid, you don't really
Yeah.
think about that. But um, so he became a light fighter, and then from from Panama, he went and became a first sergeant in Fort Bragg. So then he went through airborne school at like 36 years old or something like that.
Really
Kind of like as a gut check, yeah.
nice.
So he became a first sergeant at Bragg, and so the second half of his career wasn't atomic demolition, but his whole career was combat engineer.
Nice.
So yeah.
So are your parents they still married?
So my dad actually had contract contracted not contracted sorry had been diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2008 actually while we were deployed, and
Mm.
it was oral cancer. He was a non-smoker, non-drinker, non-tobacco user, and ended up passing away the next year in 2009.
Sorry to hear that.
When I left, yeah, no problem. I appreciate that. When I left the company, we moved down to Gainesville, Florida, to be as close as possible to him and my mom, but didn't make it in time because I think I changed command in December of
Hmm.
'09, and my dad passed in October of '09. And yeah, so she moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and met a guy about, I don't know, 10 years ago,
Hmm.
and they got married about 5 years ago. So they just celebrated or they're going to celebrate. I think they're going to celebrate their 5 year wedding anniversary this month.
Nice. Nice.
So
So
yeah,
that relationship between your father and your mother, watching your dad be a full-time soldier, being a dad, how did that shape you as the man you are today?
I think I think more than anything, the impression that he um, made on me was hard work, consistency. He got his degree by literally coming home from work, having a meal, and then he'd go sit at a Denny's countertop for 3 hours to write his papers and read
Wow.
his books and do his quizzes and all that stuff. And this was before online,
Yeah.
online stuff. And so he ended up getting his degree the hard way, and I watched him do that while I was in elementary school. I remember
Wow.
that, and I remember
Yeah.
thinking like, um, and then when it came time for to kind of influence what I was going to do with my life and where I was going to go, he was a senior instructor at the University of Tampa, as an Army ROTC instructor. That's why we ended up moving to Florida, and that's where I met my wife and where we got married. And he kind of said, "Hey, do you want to go to school? Do you want to go to college?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he slid the ROTC application across the table, and he's like, "Well, this is how you get there because
Nice.
you're not going to enlist." He basically he was like, "If you're going to go in the military, you got to go in as an officer." And he kind of explained the
Yeah.
differences. But what was cool, I felt like I had an advantage in a couple of different ways when it came to the Army. Number one, that's all I knew growing up. Like
Yep.
I was surrounded by soldiers, and I had a father who was lauded as a very very good leader by all his. I still keep in touch with some of his unit members
Hmm.
after he passed. Like I mean, he's been passed now for 15 years. I still keep in touch with his unit members because he had that kind of impact on those men that long ago, and I got to watch that. And so when I became an active duty officer, I just thought that that's what normal was,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. He set a high
Like,
standard for you.
yeah. So that was the biggest thing is being able to work hard, um, be intentional,
Yep.
and treat people like you would want to be treated.
Yeah.
And that's how I try to live now. So
Now, when it comes to your mom, how much of an influence did she have in your life? Did she work while your dad was in the military, or she was a stay-at-home mom,
yeah.
or she did work?
So she did both.
Nice.
At times where it didn't make sense for her to work, or maybe because we were overseas and there wasn't an opportunity. But anytime she had a desire to work, specifically, uh, growing up in the church, she would take on a role, whether it was our youth group.
Hmm.
Um, Mom and dad both like uh, were singers, and she played the guitar. She was an influence on me to
Hmm.
learn the guitar, and I've played that my whole adult life, and I've actually influenced my daughter to play the guitar, so
Nice.
it's kind of transgenerational, which is cool. But she definitely was the heart of our family and has a she was the soft one. Dad was who I can get to. I'd have to talk with him about some sort of logical, problem set that I
Yeah.
had or whatever.
Yeah.
But then mom was always the person that if I needed to go cry to, that's who I was going to. I wasn't going to dad for that
Yeah.
just because that wasn't in his DNA.
Yeah. 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 I get it.
But so that's what made it a good combination of a childhood because I had two parents that loved each other very much, that were very different in their own aspects, but great, great people. So
Yeah. Who do you think were the biggest influences in your young childhood?
yeah, so I would have to say my dad was probably number one.
Your dad?
My dad was probably number one. Yeah,
And that's something,
yeah,
that's something I talk about today, how profound a father's impact is on children, and just hearing that from you. I didn't have my dad growing up, but now that I'm a father, right, it is so important. And just hearing another man tell me that the most influential person in his life was his dad, that confirms my theory that, hey, dads are so important because I think we just, as men, we just love differently. We love from a place of compassion, and our children know that, but we also instill that discipline in our children. Our children know, like,
yeah,
yeah, when it comes to my dad, maybe I should not try that, but if I need some, or I need, I need anything, he's the man that I could lean on to. So that's huge. Did
yeah,
you did you have any siblings?
yeah. So I have one sister. She actually just weathered the storm Milton in Tampa last night.
Everything
So I
good?
was texting her, and I was playing Big Brother a little bit, saying
Yeah.
like, "Hey, are you good?" You know, that type of stuff. But praise God, she's safe. Sounds like there's damage, and I didn't read about everything, but she's safe. So
Yeah.
that's good. So yeah, she's 3 years younger than me. So you know, talk about automatic friendship that you have with somebody that has to move with you every two to
Yeah.
3 years. So she's the only person I could talk to about like places and people that nobody else would know except for me, her, and mom. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so
I think having siblings is very important. I had my siblings growing up, and man, those are like your childhood battle buddies, right? They're just there, like
yeah,
doing
yeah,
everything with you. They know the suck, they know all the good things, so that's good.
yeah, yeah.
At what point in your life did you realize, all right, I'm joining the army? I know your dad slid that the ROTC
It was
thing.
yeah, it was probably my junior year of high school, and when I started doing when I started trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do, I couldn't figure it out. I
Yeah.
was just like, I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want a little bit of adventure. I love to travel, and then when I looked at it, the military didn't necessarily seem like I wasn't afraid of it,
Yeah.
and because I didn't have an answer when it came to what specific field I wanted to do, like I wasn't going to be a pro ball player. I wasn't going to be, an engineer or an architect. But then my dad's inside knowledge of understanding the scholarship system for ROTC kind of helped drive a path to, hey, engineers tend to win more scholarships. Like hard science tends to win more scholarships than like history,
Yeah.
majors, that
Yep.
type of thing. So I applied for an Army ROTC scholarship my senior year and ended up getting it for engineering. The irony is that I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University
Mm.
for engineering and ended up basically failing out of the math portion of it, and I had to switch majors real quick to aeronautical science, which was just professional pilot stuff.
Yeah.
Like all my roommates were out having a great time making A's and B's, and I was studying every night making C's and D's. And I'm like, what gives? And it turned out that I wasn't a very smart engineer. So
We wouldn't say you weren't smart. You just God had other intentions for you. That's it.
there you go.
How did your mom
Because I
feel?
probably wouldn't.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say I probably wouldn't have become an aviator in the army if I didn't switch my major to
Yeah.
aeronautical science.
So, how did your mom feel when you decided to join the military?
She was supportive. Yeah,
Supportive.
there wasn't any. I mean, I know that. So where I felt her presence as a mother wasn't necessarily when I was going off to training. I mean, I always sensed her support, but I think when I sensed her worry was when I was going off to Iraq. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
Kosovo was my first deployment
Mhm.
before the Iraq War kicked off, and I think it was there that she started a prayer chain in her church for me, and then I realized like the impact that a son or daughter has entering the military on a parent. That's when
Yeah.
that's when I realized.
That is. Yeah, I agree. I never understood what my mom felt like. To me, it was never a big deal, right? Yeah, I'm joining the army.
Yeah,
I'm going to Iraq. I'm going to Afghanistan. I never understood how she felt and how nervous or scared she was a mother until I started having my own children and just thinking of my children in harm's way. It does change the way we look at life, and it makes you see things differently quickly.
yeah, for sure. It absolutely does. You're 100% right. 100%.
So for the people watching, tell me, so your dad slides you the ROTC paperwork. All right. Can you just quickly
Yeah,
walk us through that process? Because there's going to be young people out there on the cusp of, hey, do I join the military? Should I go enlisted?
yeah.
Should I go through become an officer? What was the process like for you when you started that whole journey?
So for me, I since I didn't graduate boot camp, I wasn't in the National Guard. I had no prior military training. what that meant was is I had to go through 4 years of a standard Army ROTC program at a college. So some of them have condensed. Very few of them have like a condensed program, but because I was not prior military trained, so the first 2 years, my freshman and sophomore year, um, it's basically like a once a week class commitment, a once a week like lab commitment, which is uh, going to learn how to salute and march and do squad FTXs and stuff like that, and then PT 1 to 3 times a week, depending on the specific school and the professor of military science how they run the program. So
Okay.
kind of a soft commitment sophomore and freshman year. Then your junior year, they end up ratcheting it up for training purposes and make you actually sign a contract that you agree to at the end of your graduation. You get commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army. And the reason for that contract to be signed prior to your junior year is the amount of resources and effort and
Mm,
training that they put into you.
yeah.
And then at the end of your junior year, you go to an advanced camp. I think that it's held at Fort Knox now. At the time, for me, it was held at JBLM up in Washington.
Yeah, I remember that. I was
But
stationed out there.
you go to like a 5 or 6 week camp, and then at the end of that camp, you get a score. You go back your senior year. Your senior year as a cadet, you're part of the battalion leadership. Like you're running the FTXs, you're running the once a week labs, you're in charge of the instruction with the butcher block paper and all that stuff. I'm sure you remember, and land navigation and all
Yeah.
that. And at the end of that 4 years, you end up asking for the branch that you want,
Hmm.
and uh, I ended up getting the branch that I wanted, which was aviation. Which,
Nice.
to be honest, to be full disclosure, I had no desire, honestly, prior to going to Embry-Riddle to be a pilot. None. Like I had never been in a small plane before. I had never flown in a helicopter. I've been surrounded by them my whole life. I was like, hey, Blackhawks, that's cool. I
Hmm.
got pictures of pictures that I was taking in Panama of night stalkers coming and landing and taking off and stuff, which I thought was cool. But I never said, hey, I should probably be the one doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I ended up at Embry-Riddle for engineering. I ended up dropping out of engineering and getting selected for aviation from the Army only because I changed my major. I go to flight school and then end up going to Germany with First Infantry Division as my first unit, and just fell in love with the job of soldiering
Yeah.
and being a part of a team,
Hmm.
and like tackling a complex mission as part of a team and thinking critically. That's what I fell in love with. Like
Yeah.
that was my why in the military was the people that I was with. I was not one of these guys that I have to be flying. I have to take every flight. I
Yeah.
need to,
We all know those
be the
guys.
best pilot. Yeah, yeah, that was not me. And so, to detriment, like I felt like I should have been a better pilot sometimes, but when the Army made me choose and I had to prioritize like family and faith, and then it was like, okay, with my work time, what am I doing? I wasn't like studying my nine to five dash. Like I did everything that I needed to do
Yeah.
in order to be a safe pilot, but like I would focus on the issues that were related to my team, my staff, my soldiers, my like I would be more focused on stuff outside of the cockpit.
Yeah.
And
And
I caught a rash sometimes for that from my warrant officers, but that's fine too.
yeah, but as a retired warrant officer, in your defense, the old grades, you got your primary job is to manage, lead. You aren't I'm not gonna say flying isn't your
Yeah,
primary job, but you guys are the leaders and the managers of the aviation companies, the battalions, the brigades. So
yeah,
your mindset and mission focus is different than the warrant officers, right? Now, as warrant
yeah.
officers, our shit needs to be locked in tight. You need to know everything. You need to because we're the subject matter experts, right? So,
Right, right.
but I think that's one of the biggest things I saw a disconnect in. I don't think I think a lot of O grades, the ones I've experienced, right? A lot of them were just focused on aviation and not being good leaders. So it was a
Hmm.
good balance, but you just have to decide where. And I like how you decided. I want to go back real quick. When you had to sign that contract, did they give you an option of any other branch, or was it just solely the Army?
So when you sign a contract as a cadet, you don't know what branch you're going to get.
Oh, okay.
So the way that they, at that time, this is, we're talking 25 years ago,
Yeah.
at that time, they took into account your GPA, your, a little bit of your field of study. That wasn't a primary thing, but your GPA, that camp score that you got, and your everything else you did while in college. Like if you were a leader on your campus, what jobs you took within the battalion, if you were maybe an intercollegiate athlete.
Hmm.
So they would take that on a national level. At the time, I want to say it was about 3,000 to 3,500 cadets every year were getting um, commissioned, and they would all the branches. This would happen somewhere in probably Washington D.C. All the branches would get together, and they would basically like the first top 10% or the first 5%, whatever, got their number one draft pick. Like I had
Yeah.
to submit a list.
Yeah.
I want to be an aviator number one. Medical service corps was always number two because we could go fly Blackhawks for
Hmm.
medevac in that branch. And then after that, it was like, I don't know, a mix of combat and support roles. But yeah,
Okay.
so I had no idea until I was second semester of my senior year is when they revealed that I was going to be an aviation branch officer.
Okay. Nice. So you get done with school. What happened next? Did you have to go to any basic or any training there or afterwards?
So no basics, no basics. They basically take the 4 years that you've been wearing a uniform, in class, and then the I went to airborne school while I was out as a cadet, and then that advanced camp. They take all that and they kind of like when you get commissioned, they give you your orders to whatever branch, OBC or Officer Basic Course,
Okay.
and mine was to Fort Rucker, but I had a gap in between when I graduated and when I reported. And in that time frame, I got married. My wife moved in uh, to my college apartment, basically
Hmm.
in Daytona Beach, and for 6 weeks I was called a gold bar recruiter, and all I did was just give campus tours to prospective cadets, and I
Yeah.
gave briefings on my experience over the 4 years. So I was getting paid as a second lieutenant while I was waiting on, orders to Fort Rucker, which started September 4th, 2001.
September 4th, 2001. All right, we'll get to that in a second. So you show up to flight school September 4th. We all know what happens. And that was actually a question I was going to ask. Where were you on September
Yeah.
11th and what was going on?
So flight school is a little bit different now, from my
Oh,
understanding.
big time.
There were three phases back then. For phase one was like basically a 2 week ground introduction to officership and the active duty army. Well, that day, September 11th, was our Class A inspection day. So we were all in our Class A's for the first time, as besides our commissioning ceremony or whatever. And so I was there with my class that morning when we were seeing the news about the Twin Towers and the Pentagon and in Pennsylvania. And yeah, so it's pretty much like a game changer,
Yeah.
like hadn't even been in the army. Like I commissioned uh, June June 18th of 2001, so I hadn't even been in 3 months yet before September 11th kicked off.
How did you feel at that moment? Were you like, man, were you like, shit, I'm staying in the army. I want to get out. How'd you feel?
No, I didn't. I didn't want to get out. I just mentally. So my wife of two and a half months, and who was pregnant with my daughter. Um, it was a mental change. Like I was
Hmm.
like, okay, there's not going to be a whole lot of, hey, we're going to go see the world. Like not. So to me, the army was like a ticket to kind of go, maybe go to Europe, maybe go to Hawaii,
Yeah.
go look at some places that I hadn't been before. And that was that. And flying Blackhawks was, or flying at the time, I didn't know I was flying Blackhawks, but flying were like the two things I was like, okay, this will be cool, kind of easy, automatic paycheck, everybody's safe and secure. And then when that happened, I was like, okay, all right, there's some stuff I'm going to have to go do that I didn't necessarily think I was going to have to go do
Mm-hmm.
immediately,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And in the back of your mind, you know, when you sign up, anybody that signs up for a service knows that they're signing up, you know, they're writing a blank check, right?
Yeah.
For the government to cash in, but you don't. I didn't expect that you know the government needed to cash in on my deployment status like as soon as it happened,
Yeah.
basically.
I think that's one of the most, it's a very humbling experience. And when I mentor teenagers now, that's one of the questions or realizations I tell them, like, hey, we are in the war business in the Army. All right. Going to college, traveling the world, all these benefits, those are incentives. But when it comes down to it, we are in the war business. We protect the freedoms of our country, and that's what it's about. It's mission first in the Army, and the Army does not play about it. I don't know how it is now, but I'm pretty sure it's the same way. The mission's first, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
so we're talking about 5 days into flight school. 9/11 happens. Did you guys still start flight school, or did they put it on break? What happened after that?
No, we started. Not only did we start, the rumor mill started flying like that. We were gonna skip instruments. We were gonna skip like all the all the ground school, and everybody was just going to be an Apache gunship pilot. I'm like,
uh,
that's exactly what it was. Like the rumor mill was like, we're all going straight to gunships, which obviously in retrospect, that's ridiculous.
yeah,
Um, but at the time, you don't know any better. You know, you're 22, 23, 24 years old. Um, and so no, our flight school ended up playing out like this is before social media, but so every day we would come to class, the flight line, and talk about like what we had seen or heard on the news about Afghanistan. And so we saw like, you know, grainy footage of, you know, uh, air assaults
yeah,
and airborne operations and explosions and reading all about Operation Anaconda and Special Forces and all that stuff. So we all kept a real tight shot group on like what was happening because we knew that in it took me 15 months to graduate from the beginning to the end of AQC with Blackhawks, and in that 15 months, a lot happened.
yeah,
To include the buildup, like I graduated in '02 at the end of '02, and that was being the buildup of Iraq was happening at that time. So we were
yep,
watching kind of both things happen, knowing that depending on which unit we went to, when we were leaving, not if we were leaving.
yeah.
Everybody was talking about when we would go get to Iraq or Afghanistan based on those units.
So,
So
all right, so difficulty level of flight school. How hard do you think it was?
Um, so the hardest thing for me wasn't a lot of the things that most people had a hard time with because I had picked up an instrument rating in college. I had, you know, basic. I had a private pilot's license with an instrument rating. I took a commercial license course. I took a multi-engine license course. That was all fixed wing.
Yeah,
So the hardest things for me were learning how to hover. I was one of the last people to learn how to hover in my class.
it was hard for me
It was
too.
one of those things yeah, it was one of those things I thought I'd never be able to do. It
Yeah,
took, I don't remember, 4 or 5 days. I remember every time just like starting over thinking that I'm never going to get this. And eventually, you know, it's designed for a reason. Training happens for a reason. Like,
correct.
so I got it down and I was learning how to hover at the same time my wife gave birth. So
Man,
I literally had a friend I still keep in touch with to this day. Shout out Sarah Pearson. Gave me a ride to the hospital because we only had one car, and my wife took it to the hospital for her checkup. And they told her that she had to stay there because she had like preeclampsia and she needed to get induced. And so my stick buddy Sarah Pearson drove me to the hospital. I was all hyped up. I want to say it was like maybe a Thursday before a long weekend.
yeah,
And so Peyton comes into the world, my first daughter. We celebrate, and then I think I was back to school on Monday.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was like Monday or Tuesday. Like my goal was not to recycle. You know how you start class with your friend, all your friends,
Yep.
and you buddy up and cook up, have cookouts and all that stuff.
Yep.
Like I didn't want to recycle, and I definitely didn't want to prolong flight school, and I would have had to wait like another month or 6 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
So bottom line was, that was the hard thing. So learning how to hover and not getting recycled when Peyton was born was it, and that was in November. Both of those things happened in November of '01. So November, December, like December, January, like once we moved on to instruments was easy for me. I
Hmm.
kind of preferred it because the simulator to me was easy.
Yeah.
Um, I just I cruised, like I didn't like, what was the other thing I didn't like? Oh, nights goggles. Like I ended up having another stick buddy. Shout out Ford Peterson. I still keep in touch with him too.
Yeah.
Um, he smoked. He was a UND guy. You know what I'm talking about? University of North Dakota. They have a pilot program, like a helicopter pilot
Oh, they
program.
do.
So he went through ROTC and a helicopter pilot program in college. So that way, when he came to flight school, he skipped primary and he skipped his instrument and he came straight to like whatever it was, knights or basic combat skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so him and a couple other guys, and everybody's looking at him like golden children over here.
Who are
Like, where
these
are you guys
guys?
coming
Yeah.
from? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he Ford actually ended up serving honorably in the 25th Infantry Division as a Black Hawk guy. Got out, was in the Coast Guard as well.
Really?
So
All right, we're gonna get to that.
yeah, yeah.
So you finished flight school, and one big thing about make the army makes sure that our families are good, so we could continue to do the mission at all times. That's the primary reason why everything we are taken care of well in the army. I will admit that. So you get done with flight school, brand new baby. Where does the army ship you to?
So I go to Ansbach, Germany, um, and it was First Infantry Division. The unit's name at the time was 2-1 Aviation. So 2-1 Aviation in Ansbach, Germany. And some of the orders said Katterbach. So I looked on, again, this is before Google Maps,
Yeah.
or it was the beginning of the internet. So I'm trying to figure out if this is two different places, and it essentially is the same locations, like just two different little names for it. But yeah, on 2-1 Aviation, Ansbach, Germany.
And how long you were in Germany for? 3 years?
3.5, I want to say. We got there in December of 22, and we PCSed July of 2006.
And now, when you were in
So
Germany, did you any deployments there?
so my sponsor who picked me up from the airport was like, "Hey, we're deploying to Turkey." like this was for the Iraq war, and I was
Yeah.
like, "You couldn't have given me a heads up, like you couldn't have told me anything."
Yeah.
Well, and he's like, "Nope, OPSEC over the phone. Couldn't do that." Josh Name was his name.
Yeah.
Lost track of Josh. I don't know where he's at. But ultimately, the Turkish government denied First ID invading Iraq through their sovereign land. So
I
we
remember
shipped
that
off
actually.
all our stuff. Yeah,
I,
we shipped everything. It was in a boat doing circles in the Mediterranean. Our helicopters deployed to Kosovo, which is where one of our two. So at the time, we had two flight line companies, Alpha Bravo. Both the other So one helicopter company was forward deployed to Kosovo. The Bravo company was. Alpha company that was in Germany, pre-positioned to Kosovo for the kickoff of the war. And then once it was turned off that First ID would not be a participant in the first wave,
yeah.
Alpha company came back with our battalion commander, and our battalion commander pulled me into his office and was like, "Sam, you're going to go to Kosovo and you're going to progress." So that's where I ended up doing my RL progression, was in Kosovo, and I was there for just shy of 3 months,
So how many months after you
and that
got
was
to
my first.
Germany that you started flying again? Well, you did your RL progression. For everybody, your RL progression it's a readiness level. There's 3 phases of it. You have to become RL1 to be a fully functional instrument rated combat aviator and to do the mission for the army. So how long you get to Germany? How long did you have to wait until you start your RL progression, because I know how it feels. So as soon as you get there, you want to get in that cockpit, you want to start flying, because flying is a very diminishable, it's a perishable skill. You have to do it all the time or
Yeah,
consistently. So how long was that break there?
yeah. So we showed up. My wife and I reported to Germany December 17th of 2020 or 2002, and I was trying to ask to basically push my report date till after Christmas. And they were like, "Nope, you need to come over here right now." And so we show up, and of course the whole battalion's on block leave, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense. So whole battalion's on block leave. There's nobody around. So they're like, "Yeah, you get 10 days house hunting anyway." So my buddy Kyle Button, who was uh, in flight school with me, he helped me look at some on base apartments. I snapped up the first one because we actually had gotten sick on the trip over,
Yeah.
and my wife was in the hotel with my daughter just sick. So I was like, we just need to get into a house,
Yeah.
get some government furniture, which we did. So once we got all that settled, I'll be honest with you, Jason, the last thing on my mind was like getting into a cockpit because of
Yeah.
the shell shock of, hey, you're deploying. I'm in a foreign speaking country
Yep.
now. I I don't I don't know anybody here except for Kyle and Gina Bradeen. She was in Kosovo though. Bottom line is I was like, I just want to get my family set up. That was it. Well, literally when everybody came off of block leave, they made me the S2 because our S2 was leaving, like our intel officer for the battalion was
Yeah.
leaving, and they didn't have any other jobs available. So they said, "Hey, you're going to be the S2." I didn't know anything about that,
Now
and
you're
then
a
I was put in charge.
you're a first
Go ahead.
lieutenant at this time. Did you get promoted?
I did. I just colored in my little butter bar with a Sharpie.
We used to do some
it
crazy
literally
we used to do some crazy stuff back then.
Yeah, it literally happened while we were PCS, and there wasn't anybody like that needed to tell me, hey, you need to do that, you need to have this presentation, or I just showed up like with my little first lieutenant bar, and then they're like, okay, you're the S2, like that was it,
Yeah.
just like that. So yeah, I was first lieutenant, I was the intelligence officer for the battalion, and feet to the fire, like immediately they're like, we need intel for Iraq, we need maps, we need blood chits, we need you to be in charge of the sensitive items mill van. And I'm like, okay, what are sensitive items?
Yeah.
I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And so we shipped everything out, and that was in like January and February of '02 because the war kicked off in March of
Yeah.
'03.
Yep,
I'm
I
sorry,
remember.
January and February of '03. Yeah. And at one point, I came home and told my wife that I was leaving like the next day because they're like all Humvees with their drivers and their TCs. Well, I was the S2 and I only had one soldier. He was
Mhm.
the driver, and that made me the TC for the S2 vehicle. So I came home and I told my wife, I was like, we're deploying tomorrow. I packed everything, and then the orders got changed, or the rumor mill got changed. So, dude, when you talk about like when I started flying again, I think it was when I went to Kosovo. Like after the war kicked off in
Yeah.
March, I deployed to Kosovo in March, and I want to say I was there till maybe July, and I think it was like March. So we're talking 4 months after
Okay.
after flight school.
Okay.
Yeah,
So 3 years in how was Kosovo?
it was kind of like it was honestly it was a peacekeeping mission. I was at Camp Bondsteel, and we lived in these bee huts. I remember that the chow hall was awesome because it was like
Now
my first
were they
experience.
Afghanistan bee huts, or were they different type of bee huts?
They were different.
Okay.
Yeah, they were different, I think.
Okay.
They weren't they were like multi-person,
Yeah.
uh but no walls in between. No
Okay. Yeah.
individual. Mm-mm.
All right, so
Um
you wrap up Kosovo. Where
yeah.
did you go after Kosovo? Is that when you got to Fort Campbell?
So Kosovo went back to Germany. So after Kosovo, and then I spent the next 6 months preparing for OIF 2.
Okay.
So I deployed to Iraq from Germany with first ID for OIF 2. So that was February of '04. So all of 2003, I spent either in Kosovo preparing for OIF 1 or spending, I spent about 4 months total in the field preparing for OIF 2.
Yeah.
Like I was deployed for a total of probably 6 months that year
Mm-hmm.
without being deployed to a combat zone, which was crazy,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And
So
and that was just you guys getting certified and getting ready to go to Iraq. So when did you get to
mhm.
Iraq for the first time?
February of 2004, January or February. It was either late January or early February. Oh no, it was early February because my second daughter was born in on January 23rd, 2004, and I left 10 days later. So
Man,
like,
I want to
yeah, it was not good.
I want to give your wife a huge shout out because you guys are still married. And man, if
Yeah,
if people don't know the demands that the military has on us, especially aviators, I mean, we're the first ones
yeah,
there. I mean, we're an asset. We have to move the battlefield. People want us there for support. I mean, we are gone a lot of the time. So just to put a picture on it, your wife now you have two kids. You're in Germany, getting ready, went to Kosovo, getting ready to go to Iraq again. How much time did you spend with your wife? She's in a foreign country with a baby, about to have another baby. How much time were you home throughout that? What, 2 years?
not enough, not enough. No. Uh, so in the 3.5 years we lived in Germany, I was gone for probably two of it,
Man,
honestly.
man,
And you're not wrong. She is definitely still to this day, she's the backbone and heart of the family. And she's the one that was able to make it all happen.
yeah,
Like you know the deal.
yeah,
Like it was mission first, right? The army's like, you will be here, you will do this, and you will, you got to figure out the family. And I would look to her, and it wasn't always a pleasant conversation, but at the same time, you're not absolutely 100% props to her. There's not a single thing that I have that will be on this wall back here that equals what she deserves,
yeah.
with regards to awards or anything. She definitely held it all together for the Pemberton family,
That's
100%.
that's great, man. I'm happy you have that. Tell her I said hi too when you see her.
Yeah,
But man, that is awesome.
I will.
That is great. So you show up to Iraq. What happens next? Did you? I know. All right, guys. So when you show up to Iraq, essentially what we have to do, we have to go through the whole RO progression again. There's certain types of training we have to do when we get in theater because now we have to make sure we're ready. You also have to acclimate because you're going to a different country, maybe different time zones. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. So you get to Iraq. Where'd you go originally?
I was at Camp Spiker. So before before we went up, pushed up the Spiker, we did all our RL progressions at Camp Udari there in Kuwait. But
And for all the
but
listeners, whereabouts is Camp Spiker?
so it's just about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes north of Tikrit, or 10 minutes,
Okay.
based on flight time.
Yeah.
Um, so Tikrit, Iraq. It was a it was a Saddam stronghold. It's where he had multiple palaces and a lot of people that um, endeared endeared him there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I ended up in Tikrit, and as soon as I hit boots on ground, the platoon leader that I was supposed to take over for, his name is Don Kirk. He's an '06 now at Fort Campbell. No, yeah, he's at Fort Campbell, or not Fort Campbell. Sorry, um, at Rucker. He's at Rucker, which
Okay.
is Novacell now,
Yeah,
right?
Novacell. Yep.
Novacell. All right, so he's there now as an '06, and as soon as I hit the ground in Iraq, they're like, Kirk is no longer here. He's a LNO up in up in Bakaba. So you're the platoon leader now. So like day one, as soon as I landed, there was no handoff. There was no
Yeah.
equipment. Like, I mean, Cypher.
Yeah.
Like I landed, and bottom line is I ended up that whole year I was a platoon leader. The
Nice.
the one year that I was on deck.
Now, while you're a platoon leader, are you still doing missions, flight time, all that good stuff?
So I flew 6 days a week in Iraq,
What was your
like 5 to 6 days a week.
nice?
Yeah.
That's a busy day. What was your mission set? Your mission set while you were there?
So we were a general support aviation battalion,
Yeah.
and we supported the so our we had two companies in the battalion that were flight line companies.
Yep.
Alpha Company supported the commanding general, and we supported uh, like the ADCM and the ADCO, but I think that they were called something different then.
Hmm.
Like that was like assistant division commander for operations and support, but I can't remember what they were called. But we did VIP support, we did personnel support, we did a couple of air assaults. We weren't a predominantly air
Hmm.
assault focused unit. I did a ton of hero missions. Like we maintained a night, basically a night first up, if you will, and we ended up going to Balad a lot for picking up heroes that had passed away. Actually, we would end up going to Fobs, picking them up,
Hmm.
and then going to Balad, where the mortuary affairs team was. So that there was a huge part of my mission in Iraq was all the casualties that were happening due to IEDs in
Yeah.
2004 to 2005.
That's when everything started. I remember that time frame after February. IEDs became a very prevalent thing there. It was a new tactic that they used against us. So one thing I want to touch
Yeah,
on is you said flying heroes. Okay. First off, I want to explain uh, General Aviation Battalion, General Support Aviation Battalion. All right, we essentially move the people on the battlefield, just so the regular people know. People have to go certain places. Generals have to be certain places. One of the safest ways to get there, fastest ways, is we fly them around. So we pretty much move around the battlefield. There's other different mission sets. I'll talk about them later on different podcasts. But GSAB, essentially, we're just moving people. That sound fair, Sam?
yeah, 100%.
The next thing is you talked about heroes. Uh, Real quickly, heroes are soldiers, military personnel that was killed in action. One of the most honoring things I've done, I know Sam as well, is flying heroes off the battlefield. And the reason it's important is because we are the beginning of their journey home. And there's one thing I do love about the American government, especially our military. We will do everything, fight tooth and nail to make sure our soldiers, airmen, Marines, our sailors, everybody gets home. And that's something we pride ourselves on. And being combat aviation pilots, when we do hero missions, it's just something, it just hits at a different level because, I mean, these people, these amazing human beings pay the ultimate sacrifice for us. So, do you remember your first hero mission?
Oh man, I wish I had a better recollection of some specific question like that. But unfortunately, I lost count, and everything started to get blended. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Like all the and it's just one of those things where, in order to kind of like self-preserve,
correct.
I think I just stopped like taking account of how many times. And I wish I hadn't, but at the time I had to do what I had to
Yeah,
do in order to, just like you're, just like like you can't take on that emotional burden
correct.
and still be as effective. Um, so I stopped taking count, and I remember at the end of our year, I remember thinking, man, I did that a lot. I wonder how much I did that. I was like, man, I don't think I want to know.
Yeah,
You know, I know, I don't, I know. I could tell you this. It was multiple dozen. Like whether it's 24 or 36 or 40, it was over a course of a year. It was a lot.
yeah,
It was a lot, and it was a lot to, when you land at a fob in the middle of the night and you expect to just pick up, you know, what would essentially be a litter with a human on it. That's not what they did. They would have their buddies and their whole unit
oh
out
yeah,
there, you know. paying the respect, and their buddies would just be in an absolute state that you could only imagine.
Yeah.
And you would see that because they're loading them on the helicopter as a hot load, like with the rotors turning. And if you let it, it would affect your ability to conduct your mission,
Oh
which is
yeah.
to safely take this hero from A to B. And so you have to put a wall of emotion up in order to get your job done safely and make sure you're running checklists and avoiding wires and avoiding where the S2 told you not to fly because there was a surface to air missile reported or whatever the case was. So if I had it to do over again, I keep a like a not a journal. I guess you might refer to it as a journal, but I have green books from almost every year that I was in the military, and maybe one book per 2 years, and it has like names and checklists and things
Yeah.
I had to do and all that kind of stuff. I wish I had jotted down at the end of each flight what I did, but I didn't, and I think that was on purpose.
Yeah.
You know,
And
so
and that's something I did as well. I mean, like you said, you have to disconnect somehow. It sounds I don't know I don't mean it in a nefarious way either, but the amount of trauma and the amount of things that we're dealing with as aviation guys, man, it starts to you know weigh you down a little bit. And like you said, if you didn't disconnect somehow, it would keep us from doing our job. Just so whenever I just want to paint the picture for the audience, when you go pick up a hero at a fob, it is a big deal. Like Sam just stated, usually the majority of the people are out there. It's a very sombering and sad event, but it's a huge deal. And like I said, it's just doing that repeatedly. It does start to weigh on you. So you got to try to, because there's a lot of hero missions I did as well that I don't remember. There's a few that I do, and the reason I was just trying to compartmentalize and trying to protect my mental, but like you said,
yeah,
I wish I did the same thing as well, just been very detailed with that. So
yeah, yeah.
what was, besides the hero missions in your first Iraq deployment, what stood out most to you?
So one of the things uh, we were talking earlier about the difference between warrant officers and O leadership within, a flight line company or a flight line battalion or whatever you want to call it. Um, One of the things I was very fortunate was to be able to, as soon as I hit the ground in Iraq, I was able to fly every day. I learned as much as I could from all the warrant officers that I flew with, and I was able to basically take steps, incremental steps, very, very fast in order to become a pilot in command as quickly as I did. Like I was a first lieutenant PIC within a couple of months of being there. Um, and then I quickly became an air mission commander after that, which is just basically a decision maker for a flight of aircraft, I
Yep.
guess, if you want
Yep.
to explain it that way. And because of those two things, I was able to make a positive impression on, able to make a positive impact within the company, because you know how, like, when somebody's making decisions that doesn't understand what it's like at this particular fob or doing this particular type of mission set, I was involved in all that,
Yeah.
from the planning to the execution, the preparation, everything that went around the mission. So when I would hear a gripe, whether it was legitimate or not, I would be able to answer it and talk about it firsthand. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
So I remember that being a large part of shaping me as an officer. Like, you know, it it when I came back to Spiker after, a day of flying and would hear from a particular officer about he's trying to talk about something that he doesn't know about, like a rumor or landing to a specific pad or landing somewhere,
Yeah.
I'd be like, no, nope, that's not the case.
Hmm.
Like, I was there 3 days ago. That's not what's going on there. And I was able to kind of cut that stuff off as opposed to somebody that didn't know what they were talking about running away and making some decision that didn't make any sense
Yeah.
because it wasn't rooted in truth.
Yeah.
And
So you're pretty
it
much
ended
that
up
quality
helping me.
control.
Yeah, yeah. And it helped me to do multiple things. Uh, the risk assessment level at the platoon leader level, I basically served as I empowered my warrant officers to make the decisions to write the flight schedule. I gave them the guidance that was given to me by the CEO, and they would write the flight schedule. I would approve it for the next day. Um, I would QA it. The company commander would have to approve it, but I would QA it, make sure the crews made sense based on the missions, make like looking at the makeup and be like, hey, has anybody from this crew gone to this landing zone?
Yeah.
Has anybody from this crew flown to the north or to the south? Like you didn't want four people that hadn't landed at, within Baghdad going because they're just like the blind leading the blind.
Correct.
So from a risk assessment, it allowed me to get super, super sharp on, you know, zero illume nights.
Mm-hmm.
Like who do we got? Planning ahead, because we built the schedule out, and it wasn't like this in Afghanistan, but in Iraq, every seventh day you sat, like you reset
Yeah.
every seventh day.
Yep.
We had the op tempo and the people to support that. So we put people on a standard. Hey, you reset on Sundays, you reset on Saturdays, you reset on Mondays, and so that way we had our manpower laid out at a company level to be able to support the flight schedule. And the only reason that would change is if something specific were to happen, like an uptick in something kinetic, or if we
Yeah.
had to support a specific VIP. But being able to assess the risk, that taught me a lot. I would get grilled by the battalion commander on like, okay, Sam, when's they're like, okay, you have this crew. Who here has over 500 hours of goggles? So I'm like, this guy and this guy, and we split them to generate the best crew for each one. And he's like, well, it's not actually zero loom. I was like, actually, sir, you're right. It's 90% until 23:11 when the moon sets, and then it's zero.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was able to speak intelligently about tactical mission planning, and that only happens through doing it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
flight school doesn't teach you that,
Oh,
and then doing that in garrison doesn't
yeah.
teach you
Yeah.
that either.
I tell everybody when you leave
So
flight school and get to your unit, you're still a horrible pilot. I mean, you know
yeah,
absolutely nothing
yeah,
about being an aviator
yeah,
and doing a mission set, and you still got to be a basic soldier. There's a lot going on. So
yeah.
you gain all that knowledge. You're a mission briefing officer, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
So you're AMC, like Sam said, you pretty much control the airspace in that area once you get on site. Talking to the ground guys, I'm talking from a medevac perspective. So you're pretty much a person in charge. There's a lot going on. A lot. I tell people when you get to areas, enemies still on site, got Apaches in the area. There's a lot going on. So keeping up, you got to make sure that you got strong crew chiefs, you got strong medics or gunners, whoever's on your aircraft. It is important. How long did you spend in Iraq? How many months?
12,
12 months.
12 months in Iraq.
All right, so you finish
hmm
up in Iraq, you go back to Germany. What happens after you get to Germany?
So the beautiful part about when we got back to Germany, we had to do transformation, which meant that we sent every helicopter we had back to depot. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know exactly where it went, but wherever depot is for the Army back in 2005, which meant that we had a ton of time with the families, which is what we needed. You know,
Yeah.
and then we had Europe at our disposal, and we hadn't had a chance to go to Paris or go to Prague or go, to these places that we had seen and hoped to go to. So we had moved there in December 2002, went through Kosovo, went through prep for Iraq, went through Iraq, finally got back from Iraq in 2005. So we had lived there for 2.5 years, and we were set to like PCS probably that summer. And because we hadn't had a chance to like decompress as a family, and oh, by the way, my wife and two daughters moved from Germany and lived with my parents in Tampa while I was in Iraq
Man.
because of all the stress
Yeah.
and being in a foreign country without knowing anybody or
Yeah.
knowing the language, which is actually a blessing. Because my family got to know her and she got to know my family at a level they had never had an opportunity to before. You know what I mean?
They probably realized
So
they liked her more than you, Sam.
100%, 100%. Yep.
I'm teasing you, man.
Um, so we actually applied for an extension. So
Really?
that spring, after I got back from, yep. So we applied for a 1 year. I forget what it was called. It's like a remain in place or something like that, or a ADSO. I
Yeah, that's.
forget.
I
But
I can't remember what it was called either. I don't think it was an
yeah,
ad. So is I
um,
think when they extend the time on your
yeah,
service.
yeah. I'll remember it. But yeah, we got extended to '06, which meant that we had plenty of time to enjoy Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and we actually did. Didn't have any Blackhawks, so I spent a lot of time like PTN, PCMS and vehicles, learning. And then I flipped into the assistant S3 position. So I graduated from being a platoon leader.
Yeah.
They didn't let me stay there any longer at the company level. So I went to the battalion assistant S3 position where I learned how to plan battalion level operations.
Okay.
So
When did you find out that you were coming to Fort Campbell?
So Fort Campbell, I found out about that. That was after my next tour at Quantico. So you know how like young captains got to go to aviation
Yeah.
advanced course
Yeah.
or something
I
like
think they
that,
used to
what do they
call it
call
the
it?
Captain Career Course.
Captain's career course. Well, I didn't go to the Fort Rucker version, which is the Army aviation version of Captain's career
Yep.
course. I applied for the Marine Corps version,
Nice.
which is called Expeditionary Warfare School. And a friend and a mentor of mine recommended it because he went to it, and I got accepted to that. And my wife and I moved to Quantico, Virginia, after Germany, and we lived there for 10 months on base, where I just went to school with 200 Marines and 25 joint services and 25 international services,
Yeah.
and had a great year learning about expeditionary warfare.
Yeah.
So
Shout out
that was my version of the captain's career course. Yeah.
shout out to our Marines out there.
Yeah. Steve Schreiber, one of my good buddies that I met there, ended up becoming the football holder for Obama. He was a Harrier pilot. He ended up commanding a Harrier squadron in
Yeah.
the Marine Corps, and then ended up either before or after that, I think he ended up carrying the football for Obama. And I saw him out in Hawaii when Obama was out there vacationing. Once I was out there in Hawaii for with the Coast Guard. But
Nice. Nice. So
cool.
how was that? How was that being around the Marines for 10 months?
It was intense.
Those guys are gotta love the Marines. Like I said, shout out to the Marines. Those guys are next level, man. We're just
Respect.
think about it, right? We're aviators. It is different for aviators in the Army. I mean, we are treated pretty much. The Army knows that they need us, so they just leave us alone. That's how it was when
Yeah.
I was there. Things did start to change a little bit, where they started to try to
Yeah.
make us do some crazy Army stuff, and a lot of the aviators like, come on, bro. But we dealt with it, and I don't know how it is now,
Yeah.
but how's it going from an aviation unit to full blown marine base with
Yeah.
all these crazy guys around?
Yeah. I got yelled at a couple times, and I just took it on the chin.
Yeah.
Like I went and like for example, we were doing playing soccer for PT or frisbee football or something. It was a gentleman's course, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like I'm up at 0400 doing. So we're doing PT on our own, and as a class, we decided to get together and play some sports. So I threw on my cleats, and then after we're done, I was gonna go to the shopette over here and get myself a Gatorade. So I go grab myself a Gatorade, and I'm standing in line, and I got somebody like I'm in civilian clothes. I'm not in uniform, and somebody rolls up in there. He's like, "Hey, devil dog, what you doing up in here with cleats on? Like that's against policy. Get out." I was like, "All right, I'm out." Like
Uh,
I ain't playing. I'm like, you got it, Gunny.
Man.
So it was funny. Different culture for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah.
Do you think going to that captain careers course with the Marines, you think that gave you a competitive edge over other aviators, or you think gave you? How do you feel about that?
I don't know. I don't know. I do know that it was really, really good for me professionally and personally, which
Hmm.
is all I wanted. And I don't know if it gave me an edge from like a planning perspective. Am I choppy to you, Jason?
Now you a little bit, but you're coming in. You're good now.
All right,
You
cool.
there?
Um, I don't know if it gave me an edge from like a tactical perspective, um, or even like a professional edge. I think that I think that there's about, I don't know, 15 Army officers total at that course, maybe 10, 15,
Yeah.
somewhere in that ballpark. And it was an honor to be selected. I think there was maybe a total of 3 Army aviators that were at that course out of 250.
Nice.
So that was an honor. Yeah, it was only once a year course. So
Okay. Now, did you go to Fort
that
Campbell?
and that's when I think. Yep, that's what I was going to say. That's when I figured out I was going to Campbell in October of 2006. Sean Higgins was the branch manager, and that was just up the road in Fort Belvoir, maybe. But it was before branch HRC, before HRC moved to Knox. They were up the road
Yeah, it was
in
Belvoir.
Virginia,
Yeah, I think it was in Belvoir.
and I actually got to drive up there and sit down with them face to face. It was the first time I'd ever sat down with the branch manager.
Nice.
And I wanted to go to Hawaii. Amanda and I wanted to go to Hawaii for a long time. We wanted to go to Hawaii over Germany, but Germany was number 2, so we were happy with that. Um, and he gave me, it was like playing poker. He's like, where do you want to go? I was like, Hawaii. He's like, nope. And I was like, how about Fort Bragg? And he's like, nope. I was like, okay, how about you just tell me what options I do have? And
Correct.
he's like, you can go to Hood, you can go to Fort Hood. I was like, nope, been there twice as a kid. I'm not going to Hood. He goes, Fort Drum. I was like,
Definitely not.
nope, too cold. And Fort Campbell and Korea were the other two, and I wasn't interested in Korea. I I think I would have enjoyed Korea, but I'm glad that I went to Campbell because of obviously all the relationships and
Yeah.
friendships that I have now from the time that we were stationed together there.
Yep. So you show up to Fort Campbell. Uh, I know you didn't get to Alpha Company till 2008. What did you do for that year?
I was the assistant brigade S3.
Okay.
So I worked for Major Dave Kramer. Shout out to him. Um, he was a good mentor, and then got to know a lot of guys. Bernie Harrington, I think he's a general now at somewhere. John Klein, he made it to 2-star general, and I think he's retiring soon. All of those guys I met in the 3 shop,
Hmm.
all of them, and then I got to know. I think Tom O'Connor he was a S3 for the Cav Squadron, and I got to talk to him and know him really well. So just a really good experience working at the 3 shop. Now it was hard. That was really, really hard. The expectations were very, very high
Oh yes,
from Colonel Jim Richardson, and
especially at a
there were nights where I didn't get.
brigade level. I could only imagine, man.
Yeah,
So there's nights.
made a couple of good friends in there. Yeah, go ahead.
You're saying there are nights where you didn't make it home till late.
Like I would call Amanda and tell her like I don't know when I'm coming home. And I'd roll in at midnight,
Sheesh.
like literally. And that was tough, and because we had our third daughter at Fort Belvoir when we were at stationed in
Yeah.
Quantico, so we moved to Campbell with 3 kids under the age of 5, and it was almost as though I was deployed
Ah.
because I'd go do PT and I'd stay at Campbell, and that was 5, 6 days a week, and it was tough. And I think part of it was, we were prepared to deploy to Afghanistan, so the work was important,
Mhm.
right? It wasn't busy work. It was like planning for when this brigade got to Afghanistan. So the work meant something.
Yeah.
Um, Now, does that mean that it was justified that I was staying there? Um, I don't know. I don't think that I mismanaged my time though.
Yeah.
I think that I I did everything that I could in order to maximize my time with my family
Yep.
and do my job well. I was just doing the best I could at the time, you know.
Yeah.
That was
To add to that, I asked my adult children, I asked them about 6 months ago, and I asked them a question because I was just sitting at home, just came across my mind. I asked them, I said, hey, with me being gone as much as I was gone in the Army, did that have a negative impact on you? And my kids are now, my oldest daughter is 21, my oldest son is 24. And they both said, Dad, we understood what you were doing and the importance of it. So it didn't have a negative impact on us because we knew the gravity of the situation. So one of the biggest thing
yeah,
I want to tell a lot of men out there is as long as you're present when you are home, love your family, be there, right? And be that good father, they will understand if you're out there doing the things that you have to do to make sure you're providing a good quality of life, making sure you take care of mom. It's just that's what we do as men, right? We got to make sure our families are okay. And sometimes it means we may be gone for a little while.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's well said. And I still struggle with that, right? So like I still have one at home. She's 17, and a lot of my work, like I'm in my home office, and a lot of my work is
Yeah.
right here,
Yeah.
right, attached to my hand
Yep.
all the time. So it is something I have to be extremely conscious about and intentional. I have it. I have a little post-it note here. Be intentional.
Yeah.
Um, I got to be intentional about putting that down and making sure that the time that I said I would dedicate for family is actually being protected.
Yeah.
You know, because the phone rings, they also understand that when the phone rings, it's work
Hmm.
calling. And my work right now doesn't have hours, but to your point about being present, it doesn't matter what your role is or what your job is. Being present is super important.
Correct. Correct. So, and my hat's off to you, Sam. I get it, man. Being an entrepreneur, starting different business ventures, it gets hard. But one thing I've learned in the last year and a half, I would say, is to make sure that I continue to invest and pour into myself because my adult children are watching, my 5-year-old's watching, and the people that I lead are watching, right? So I want to make sure I embody the message that I spread to them. So taking care of myself, making sure that, hey, we are present. Biggest thing, just be the man that you say you're going to be, right? I tell a lot of guys that
Right.
just if you're going to spend time with your wife, put that shit on your calendar, just like you do everything else. Block it out and hold that standard. You have to. Because if you don't, if she loves
Yeah.
you, and I'm not saying you, I'm just speaking in general right now, right?
Yeah.
If you don't
Yeah.
hold that standard, she is going to check you later. She's going to, and you're going to not want to deal with it. So just be a man of your word. The biggest
Yeah.
thing. All right. So you show up Fort Campbell. At what point we get deployed? We left. I know you're Advon, right? You got there December 07 in Afghanistan.
I did. Sure
Yeah,
did.
I got there.
Yeah.
It's crazy. January 10th, 2008 is when I got into Afghanistan. I'll never forget it. It was just right after that big snowstorm, so there was snow everywhere and it was freezing. I tell people Afghanistan cold is a whole nother level, man. Just just like
Yeah.
Afghanistan dark,
Yep.
it's a whole nother level. So we get there, Alpha Company. At what point? Because we're really not even going to touch on it. Alpha Company, we're in a situation. Not morale was low in the company, and rumorville is going on around. Hey, when are we getting a new company commander? To my knowledge, I can't remember when you got there. I'm thinking around March, but correct me when I'm wrong and let me know how you found out that you were going to be the Alpha Company commander.
Yeah. So I took command in May
May, okay.
of Alpha Company, and I think I probably found out probably that February or March.
Okay.
Um, Believe it or not, the brigade commander had told the battalion commanders that he was going to switch out company commanders because they were asking for all company commanders to stay put.
Mhm.
Like battalion commanders were asking that they not switch out their company commanders while in combat.
You there? Can't hear you.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yep, got you.
Cool. So I'll pause. So battalion commanders didn't want to switch out company commanders for consistency. They wanted them to stay the same.
Yep.
And I battalion commanders tell me that during my interview that they were forced to have with me to just meet the yeah, that's right.
That's a nice way to do an interview.
Before we deployed, I interviewed with a bunch of battalion commanders because of the task organization. As a Black Hawk guy, I could have gone and worked for the Apache battalion commander or the Kiowa battalion commander, and so I interviewed with multiple BCs before that being kind of told to me like, hey, we don't want to switch, but I just want to take this meeting to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
So however it shakes out, I know that the brigade commander has a role in it. The battalion commanders probably have a say in it, and then the S1s make their little magic happen. And I found out, me and my buddies at the brigade found out where we were going, which was cool because I got to go. Ian Fuller, shout out to Ian Fuller, who took over for um, Bravo Company Lancers in 5th Battalion, and I got to fly down to Kandahar to see his change of command
Nice.
that summer as well. Yeah, so that's when we took command was in May of 2008.
Nice. So you show up to Alpha Company. What was the first compared to your Iraq deployment to Afghanistan? What was the biggest differences that you could immediately see?
Well, before I took over the company, the biggest differences between the two deployments I could tell was Afghanistan was way more kinetic.
Oh
Meaning,
yeah.
at Iraq, we dealt with a ton of IEDs and a ton of, mortuary affairs and all that kind of stuff, which is super sad. But Afghanistan, those guys were planning ambushes, fighting us, staring us down, trying to shoot us down. We had multiple helicopters get shot down that never even made the news, just based on how quickly they got recovered and all that kind of stuff. So knowing that was kind of a like I walked into the company still having this mindset of how can I help, and I had the history of risk risk management and making sure crews were appropriate, but I didn't know any of you guys.
Yeah.
So it was very very fast, steep learning curve on getting to know you know you and Matt Cole and Adam Maltby and Dave Draper and you know Gary Simmons. Like I can keep going, but
Yeah.
I didn't know you guys at all, and I had to figure out who you guys were on paper and then who you were in person, and make sure that I wasn't the reason that there was some mess up to the schedule, And Tim Sharp kept me out of trouble, making
Yeah.
sure that the schedule was appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out Tim. And yeah, I mean, bottom line was is you guys welcomed me with open arms, and it was one of the things I didn't expect.
Yeah.
I just you don't expect that. Nobody that takes command of a company expects that type of reception,
Yeah.
and I was just floored by it, and I was very honored, very honored.
We were a very tight group in 2008, Alpha Company. I mean, that is a special group of guys and ladies. Those are dudes, even to this day. You're one of them. You call me today, like when I found out about your retirement party, I didn't care what was going on. I'll be there. I mean, and that's the mantra I live to this day. I mean, those warlords, we were tight. And it's like you said,
Yeah.
Afghanistan. Oh wait, as an aviator, we were very very busy, very kinetic. I mean, we're in Korengal a lot. It's just every time we showed up, things started to happen. So
Yeah.
it was a very busy time, and hell, I even learned a lot as an aviator, a young aviator there. So, what is one of your most memorable moments of 2008 being the company commander?
Oh my goodness. Man, there was so much. There's just so much. Uh, I'll tell you one of the things that I was most proud of, and it has nothing to do with being in a Black Hawk, which was uh, coming coming into a company like Alpha Company where everybody's awesome, but then meeting Jamie Halchasek,
Oh man,
like the first time I ever met Jamie Halchasek, he was looking down on me as a battalion at of 6th Battalion. Just to set the scene for folks that don't know Jamie, probably 6'5", 6'4", 6'5",
yeah,
probably 260 pounds, just a mountain of a man,
big
and
dude.
just the most humblest uh, guy that you'd ever meet. Just a servant, the total epitome of a servant leadership, a servant leader, taking care of people, and you know was also had a side of him to understand people enough to um, touch their lives beyond the uniform. You
Yep.
know what I mean?
Yep.
And my relationship with him started before I took command, but I could tell immediately when I took command, like I was like, I thanked God for providing a first sergeant, which I knew is like a critical, like
Yeah.
the number one thing like a company commander needs is a really, really good first sergeant. They make them all kinds of ways, all shapes and sizes, all different kinds of leadership styles. But I could tell immediately, like he knew the company inside and out. He would do anything for them, and he was soldier first.
Yep.
He wasn't like policy first. You got to do what the policy says. You got to do what the battalion says. He would filter it out. He would cut through the BS, and he would make decisions based on what was best for the soldier, and worked within his God-given talent.
Yeah.
And he's
And
still one of my best friends to this day.
and in fact, he'll be on our next episode, man. Jamie, that dude, I'm telling you, when I tell people, when there's certain people you meet in life that God specifically put them on earth, that they're just like a living angel. That dude right there, I have
Yeah,
never in my life met an NCO of that caliber. I mean, and it's him and I were on the phone last week, and I go, Jamie, have you even yelled ever in your life? He's like, nah, not really. I'm like, this is a tower of a man, and this dude, he could pretty much strangle anybody if he felt like it. But
yeah,
big gentle giant.
yeah.
We're gonna have him on next week, and man, I'm telling you, I'm excited about that. So
That's
meeting,
awesome. I can't wait.
yeah, meeting Jamie, very profound impact. Is there anything else that was very significant about 2008?
Well, look, I think if you were to roll tape, I think that the number one thing that I'm most proud of that specific tour is we brought everybody home.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
We brought everybody home.
And I think that's one of the most important things. I mean, we did a lot of crazy shit out there that year. Flying, I did a lot of flying with Double D, Maltby. You and I flew a lot together. I mean, but everybody made it home, and that from a company commander standpoint, that's something that I mean you should pride yourself on that, like very very
Yeah,
very highly, because there's some people that can't say that, right?
yeah.
So I left Afghanistan December 2008. I think it was 13th. When did you leave?
I didn't leave until late January. Late January, maybe even early February. I was the very like one of the last chalked to leave.
So
And
for
unfortunately, I got tapped with being the chalk commander, which of the 250 people I was with, which kind of sucks because they had other company commanders with me that weren't too happy about that. It's fine. It's over.
yeah, eh,
We're good.
there's a reason why you were in charge. You know, some people struggle with self reflection, right? All right, so you spent essentially 14 months in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
left the company at that time because I went down to Rucker to go be a SEER instructor. And the the crazy thing, the way I became a SEER instructor was from Jamie. Jamie came to me one day. He said, "Hey, Mr. Santiago, you ever thought about being a SEER instructor?" I'm like, "Nah, why? I'm gonna fly helicopters, man." He's like, "Hey, HRC, if you want to take a break," because even then I was going a lot myself, so I feel like I need to take a quick break. He's like, "Hey, Rucker needs SEER instructors." I said, I checked it out, applied, and they picked me up. So I left. I left in April. You got back in February. I don't think I saw you again when I before I left. So
Okay.
you guys went back to Afghanistan in 2000. When did you guys go back to Afghanistan?
So I was lucky. They went back in 2010, but I changed command and I left in December of 2009.
Ah,
Now,
okay.
the battalion commander asked me to stay in multiple different ways. Like the
Mm-hmm.
first way was like he wanted me to take HHC and go back, and I was like, I don't think I can do that. My dad
Mm-hmm.
was going through,
Yep.
radiation and chemo
Yep.
and all that stuff. And then a couple months later, he asked me to take Delta Company, which was a huge honor. Obviously, any battalion commander that asks you to take command of a battalion or of a company,
Yeah.
especially the largest company in this battalion, which is Delta Company,
Yep.
it's not a light request,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one that I had to think about it, but I didn't think very long because I'm looking at my three daughters. I I had been deployed at this point now 3 times operationally. I had been gone for a total of three years probably with train ups and all that stuff in a 6 year window, and I had to turn them down. I ended up, and then that's when, so December 2009, I ended up changing command, um, and then to Travis, Captain Travis, and then went to University of Florida to be an ROTC instructor for a year and a half. My
Yeah.
last year and a half in the Army.
All right, Sam. So you're at the University of Florida, correct?
That's right. That's
And
right.
at what point did you realize, you know what, it's time for me to leave the Army? Let me check out the Coast Guard. Can you talk to me about that? Because number one, I have no idea how you did that, and when I found out you did that, I was like, man, that man's a genius. But oh, just talk us through that. Like, what made you make a
Yeah.
decision? How'd you do it?
Yeah.
And we'll go from there.
All right. So first of all, I had no intentions on joining the Coast Guard. I honestly didn't know about Coast Guard aviation until like that Ashton Kutcher movie came out with Kevin Costner, like The
Yeah.
Guardian,
Yep.
and then I signed a couple of letters of recommendation for warrant officers when I was a CO at Warlords to put in a Coast Guard application, and that's when I first discovered like that was even something that existed. They
Mm-hmm.
basically have what's called a DCA program, or a Direct Commission Aviation program. Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines can all apply. There's a format that they comply with through a local Coast Guard recruiter. It happens twice a year. And so I had no intention at all of joining the Coast Guard. Yeah, so I basically knew I was going to get out of the Army after I called them up and asked them if I could get my MBA from the University of Florida, where I was teaching Army RTC.
Yeah.
And they not only told me no, they're like, we have you going to ILE, which is Intermediate Level Education, which is CGSC, Command and General Staff School at Fort Leavenworth in February. Like, and I'd only been at um, we'd only lived in Gainesville for like 6 months.
Wow.
And so I was like, wait a minute. I thought I was on 3-year orders here. They're like, no, you're on 2-year orders. Which only essentially left me there for another 18 months. And I was really enjoying some time with the family. The
Yep.
job was okay. The kids were awesome. The town was great. And I was like, man, that's not enough of a break because as soon as I take my 3 school-age kids by this point out of school in Gainesville and put them in school in Leavenworth, I have to pull them out of the middle of school year. So 3 different times within an 18-month period or a 12-month period, I'd have to take them out of school, and that didn't sit right with me,
Yeah.
especially after all the things that we'd already did. And now I know that there's plenty of other families that had sacrificed even a lot more, right, time wise and
Hmm.
deployment wise, but it just the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for me. And I was like, well, I guess God's got plans for us to do something else outside of the army because my obligation's up and I'm just gonna exit. So I started to put my name in the hat for different business headhunter groups
Yeah.
and started to look at who would pay for an MBA for me, and then I'd just go work at corporate somewhere.
Yep.
My
Let,
best
let,
friend,
let me add something
go
real
ahead.
quick, Sam. Just so the
Yeah,
audience knows, when you're a warrant officer or an O grade in the aviation community or just in general, making that decision to leave the Army, the career that, because I love the Army, I'll be very candid about that. To make that decision to leave, especially after multiple deployments, you're establishing yourself in the career. It's a very hard decision. So I just want the audience to know that you didn't make this. This wasn't a light decision. I know you had a lot of sleepless nights, many conversations with your friends, family, and your wife, children. So just want everybody to know that is not an easy decision.
yeah, I appreciate that. And I looked at it like a business decision for my
Yeah.
family. Like
Yeah.
I'm running my family as a business, and I'm
Yep.
not getting to spend any time with them. You know,
Yep.
how do I want to be remembered as a father? Kind of like what you talked about. Like I was on a path to go back to Afghanistan as a battalion XO and S3. Was I well trained to do that? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Would I've been able to be successful? Yes. But the sacrifice that I knew would need to take place, I was not willing to do.
Correct.
So, so my best friend, shout out Ryan Abear, he and I met in college. He was one of my biggest influences to become a pilot in college. He flew Black Hawks for about 5 years in the Army. He's 2 years older than me. Went through ROTC,
Mm-hmm.
commissioned in the Army as a Black Hawk guy. Flipped into RC-12s, which is a fixed wing, MI platform. Commanded here at Fort Stewart, and while he was commanding at Fort Stewart, he was neighbors with a coastie who worked at Hunter Army Airfield. And then when he started talking to him, come to find out that neighbor used to be in the Army. So
Really?
they started talking about how to transfer into the Army or transfer into the Coast Guard. My buddy successfully transfers into the Coast Guard, moves his family out to Hawaii, and calls me from Hawaii once he realizes that I was getting out of the Army.
Yeah.
And he's like, Sam, you got to come into the Coast Guard. And I was like, really? I was like, and he was an '04. Like I had penned '04 at University of Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and he had 3 kids. And then when you transfer into the Coast Guard, at that time, you become an '02. So
Mm.
huge, huge
Yeah.
pay dip. And I was like, how is it possible? He's like, trust me, it sucks for 2 years but as soon as you get promoted to '03, you're an '03 with like 12 or over 14 years. The pay scale, it leapfrogs the '04 with over 8 or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, but it does. You just got to cinch your belt for 2 years and then you're back on track. And I was like, all right. So I was like, I'll just try it out. So he gave me the number of the recruiter that he used out in Denver. I put together a packet which consisted of all my awards, my OERs, 3 letters of recommendation, um, an interview with my medical stuff, and an interview with a local aviation like air station. So the closest air station was Air Station Clearwater. So I took leave from Gainesville, drove down to Clearwater, stayed the night. I did the interview. It was almost like an NCO board where you're in
Yeah.
your Class A's and you walk in, you sit down, and you're sitting against three people, but they're all pilot officers in the Coast Guard already, and they're just trying to get to know you, and they're
Yeah.
writing down notes, and they have like a grading scale. But there's questions that you have to be prepared for. Like they give you an IFR chart, and you have to brief it.
Mm.
They give you a leadership challenge question. They give you like a safety of flight issue, how you would address that. But the whole purpose of the interview is for them to just to get to know you.
Yeah.
And would they want you in their wardroom, which is just the name of the group of officers at that unit. And thought I did well. And come to find out a couple weeks later, and I still have it, I got rejected. It was like a non-select. I thought, okay, God's got other plans. I wasn't meant to be in the Coast Guard. And it said that is like look at other Coast Guard programs to see if you're qualified for them. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I go back to the headhunting thing for the Army, not for the Army, for businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get a call in October of 2010, and my board results came out that summer. And the board is held twice a year, one spring, one fall. And when the results of the spring board came out that summer, I just like, okay, God's got other plans. Well, the recruiter switched out that summer, and the recruiter taking over the office of the recruiter that put my package in cold called me and said, hey, I got your package here. Do you want to roll it into the fall board? And I said, no, I don't. And he goes, well, why not? And I was like, that's just an emotional roller coaster. I don't feel like
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to take leave again. I got to go answer questions again. I got to go do medical and dental exam. He goes, no. All those results are good for 1 year, and they roll over to this fall board. I was like, okay, well, if I don't have to do anything, yeah, you can put my packet in. I was like, is that what you're saying? I don't have to do anything? He goes, no. I was like, well, let me ask you a question. If I didn't get selected in the spring and I don't change anything to my packet because my letters of recommendation were the highest I could already get,
Yep.
I wasn't in a flying position, so I didn't have any updates to my flight time, and I didn't get any new awards. I was like, so why would it change? And he goes, you never know from board to board. There's different people at each board. I was like, all right, if I got nothing to lose, just do what you want to do. I thought he was looking for quotas. You know what I mean? Not a
Yeah.
recruiter. Turns out there is no DCA quota. He was just doing his due diligence and following up on the packages that were on his desk that he just took over for. Oh, I totally forget about this conversation. This is in October.
Mm-hmm.
And December 23rd, I get a manila envelope in the mail. My wife hands it to me. She goes, what's CGRC? I was like, I don't know. I've never heard of CGRC. Coast Guard Recruiting Command. I pull up a piece of paper and it's like, congratulations, you're a primary select for our DCA program. And I was floored, Jason. I thought
Yeah.
like best case scenario, I would become an alternate.
Mm-hmm.
But they only picked out three. I learned this later. They only picked three people out of 67 packets to get selected.
Damn.
And I was the only rotary wing guy to get selected. So I literally tell my story as though I won the lottery because that's how I feel. I feel like I won the lottery to join the Coast Guard.
Damn.
It was a really good organization. Yeah.
Man. So you get the letter. Where do you go from there? Did you have to do any training, or you just show up at a Coast Guard station and you're working as a Coast Guard person? Huh?
Almost. It's pretty close. So I got that letter, and I was still in the Army. And so they call me up and they say, hey, if you're going to accept, we need to know. And if you're not going to accept, they go to like the next person on the list. So my wife and I talked about it. We prayed about it over the course of that Christmas break, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we made the decision basically within a week, like, yeah, this makes sense. It's not like 1 year long deployments. You get to continue to serve and fly. It's job security,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing anything else. And then the people that I knew in the Coast Guard, like my best friend, and they would kind of dispel rumor. They were like rumor control for me. So I called him up. I was like, yeah, we'll take it. I'm like, where am I getting stationed? He goes, we won't know until we know what helicopter you're flying. I was like, yeah, you don't know what helicopter I'm flying? Because I thought I was a Black Hawk guy. I thought I would just automatically be a
Yeah.
Jayhawk
Yep.
pilot. They're like, no, no, we have DCAs that need to transition into our H-65 Dolphin helicopter as well, and we won't know that until the springtime. I was like, okay, so it's kind of like a leap of faith. I'm signing yes, but I don't know what I'm going to fly, and I don't know where we're going to live.
Mm.
They're like, we'll call you and we'll submit your dream sheet and we'll let you know. Well, everything that I heard was that the Coast Guard was hurting for, or Air Station Clearwater, where I had done my interview, had like 12 MH-65s, and we're always in need of what they call nuggets, which is just new pilots. And so I just gave the detailer, which is also the branch manager, one thing. I said, I'll take 60s to Clearwater, and that's all I gave him. And in April, he called me up as I was so I had three different checklists, or I knew I was getting out of the Army, so I was working on an out processing checklist. And he called me up in April and was like, I got good news, bad news. Bad news is we're going through an H60 upgrade. They're going through their CAS upgrade model, like the Mike model
Hmm.
upgrade.
Yep.
So they're like, every pilot we have in the fleet has to go through this course, and it's like a pig in a python right now, where I can't get you into the training course for it for a year. I said, all right. So I ended up in 65. So I was like, well, that's not bad news. He goes, the good news is I got 7 duty locations for you to choose from.
Look at that.
So he gave me a list, and Hawaii was on that list, and that's why we ended up in Hawaii.
Nice.
So yeah,
Nice.
so I transitioned out of the Army that summer and into the Coast Guard that summer, and had a great experience. Where my first duty station was Air Station Barbers Point in uh, Hawaii, Oahu.
How was your man? That's that's a good example of delayed gratification right there, right? You couldn't get and
Yeah,
it's crazy how as long as you continue to do the right thing in life, things will turn out good for you. You didn't get it through the Army, but you got there through the Coast Guard. So
yeah, yeah.
that's how was your transition leaving the Army? How did the Army treat you, knowing that you were leaving the Army and going to the Coast Guard? Was it a good experience? Did they, give you a hard time? How was that?
It was a great experience actually. I anticipated a bunch of issues, but
Yeah.
my branch manager, once she found out that I was going to the Army, she was super congratulatory. She's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, that's great. That's awesome." Um, she let me know what paperwork I needed to file. My brigade commander was super appreciative. At that time, the way that we were blocked and on our OERs, I anticipated being like center of mass,
Yeah.
because you got to save that above center mass for like your performers that are going up the food chain.
Yep.
And so that's what I anticipated, getting center mass. And he gave me above center mass, which meant a lot, because he still showed me that even though I was leaving the Army, he gave me what he thought I was deserved,
Yeah.
and that meant a lot. And then I just got a bunch of handshakes and good looks and all that kind of stuff.
Good.
What was a little weird was me teaching ROTC cadets and helping them prepare for their future in the Army as I was leaving.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
like, "Well, what are you doing exactly?" And I just was like, "Oh, don't worry about it."
Yeah.
I
You
was
got to
like,
deal with that.
"Good luck."
It's not imposter syndrome, but something similar to it, right? You know you're not doing it anymore. You're telling
A
these
little bit.
Yeah, you telling these students, "Hey, do this," but hey, I'm not going to do it. So I get what you're talking about, man.
A little,
That'd be
little bit.
tough. What was one of the biggest? What's the biggest difference between the Coast Guard and the Army?
Um, Coast. Well, there's a lot of differences. I'd say the number one difference, what struck out immediately, was the Coast Guard is very concerned about their members, and because I think they can afford to take action on personnel issues, in a much more expedient way and faster way because they're a smaller service, like way
Yeah.
smaller. Like
Yeah.
I think there might be a total of 50,000 total active duty Coast Guard, and that's like Fort Hood, Fort
Yeah.
Campbell. So if you think about any large duty station in the Army, that's the total number of coasties that are in the entire nation, and that's because they operate autonomously at small locations, just a handful of people at
Hmm.
small locations. And so when they talk about, you know, taking care of their people, there is a lot of weight behind it, a
Yeah.
lot of weight behind it. And that was the number one thing culturally that I appreciated about the Coast Guard immediately.
Hmm. So how long were you in Hawaii for?
I was there for 5 years. Yeah,
Five
we were
years.
stationed there for 5 years. Uh huh.
And
Yep.
after Hawaii, where do you go to?
So we moved to Savannah, Georgia, where I was stationed at Hunter. And we live in Richmond Hill, about 20 minutes south of Savannah. And that's where I ended up picking up an extra designation in the or in the Coast Guard. They call it aeronautical engineer. The irony is
Mhm.
that even though I failed out of engineering in college, the aeronautical engineer role in the
Yeah.
Coast Guard is it's a leadership and additional maintenance manager, maintenance test pilot type of specialty, I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay. And was that for the
Yeah.
airframe you were currently flying, or for all of them?
No, it's just for the one I was flying. Yeah. So there's uh, 4 or 5. We had up uh, 3, 4, 5 helicopters at Barbers Point, and there was fixed wing C-130s at Barbers Point.
Hmm.
And then when I came to Savannah, it's just the 65 unit. There's 5 helicopters with 2 B-0 aircraft, or what you would call first up aircraft. One in Charleston, 24 hours, and
Hmm.
one in Savannah for 24
Okay.
hours.
Okay. So
Yep.
can you tell me about how you won that award, the Maritime Interdiction Award?
Maritime interdiction is actually at my next unit um, where you came. So HITRON is helicopter interdiction tactical squadron, is a unit, the only unit in the Coast Guard that has 100% solely dedicated to maritime interdiction for counter narcotics, trafficking of human, you know, people, but
Yeah.
mostly counter narcotics. And I was doing a deployment. The deployments out of Hitron are on the back of Coast Guard cutters for a couple of weeks, couple of months at a time, depending on
Mhm.
how big the cutter is and how long the patrol is. And there's all kinds of resources that helps us find a fast moving, a go fast, or a partially submerged vessel, semi-submersible. That's these are a part of a huge transnational drug cartels coming out of Central and South America, coming up through the Caribbean, and then coming up through the Eastern Pacific. Just thousands upon thousands of pounds of drugs. Well, in 2021, I was on a deployment. It was the height of COVID, and we got uh, a target acquired, launched on it, lost that particular target, and came back, refueled, went out, and came across 2 targets that were basically DIW or dead in the water. And they were just side by side, and you could tell from the type of vessels they were. They had drums and packages on board that were consistent
Mhm.
with drugs. Well, they're first of all they're DIW, and then they spot us, like we're high in altitude, monitoring, getting our approvals to come down and interdict, and then one starts to go away, and one's like hanging back. He knew that the guy hanging back was probably more of the guy in charge, so we end up coming down, got our approvals, and we have a gunner in back that shoots out the engine blocks. That's what
Mhm.
we were doing. We give them all kinds of warnings. We have to tell them to stop on channel 16, the distress channel. We do warning shots in front of their vessels so it's visible that
Mhm.
we're armed and we're asking them to stop. And they still didn't stop. So multiple attempts to try to get this guy to stop, and they have a tactic that they know that our helicopter can't turn left without adversely affecting the helicopter aerodynamically. So they
Mhm.
kept turning left
Mm.
under our helicopter, so we would have to do go arounds. We did that about 15 times.
Wow.
So I'm in the left seat. My buddy Matt, who's the aircraft commander and the mission commander, he's in the right seat, and him and our gunner Jimmy, they're working together to try to get a shot. Well, we all kind of figured it out, and we just stopped at the distance that this guy kept turning left and ended up taking multiple shots at an extremely long range, ended up causing that vessel to become DIW. And of course, every time they go underneath of us, they're dropping their cargo out.
Mhm.
So I'm over there in the left seat marking the GPS coordinates for us to go back and coordinate to the small boat to pick those packages up. Meanwhile, the other vessel that took off, we told our ship, the vessel, we told them, hey, they're headed in this direction. This is where they're at. So they get a small boat with some shotguns, and they're trying to take it out side by side. So they're running next to it, and it wasn't affecting it.
Yeah.
And so they asked us as soon as we wrapped up with this other one to come over there and help them out. So we did that, knocked those out. We were able to pick up all the drugs and knock out two of those things. That whole interdiction got wrapped up into an award and sent off and actually won the Maritime Interdiction of the Year award. So it was our crew of three. It was just three of us, me,
Yeah.
Matt, and Jimmy,
Yeah.
that ended up. We got flown to the White House to get this award presented to us. But the thing that made me really nervous was that award presentation was like July 21st of 2022, the day before I saw you for
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
my retirement. Yeah, and so I was coming back on the red eye that night, but I was nervous that I wasn't going to be able to, make it. So that was
Yeah.
a crazy interdiction. That was one of 14 interdictions I was lucky enough to be a part of at that unit, and it was just a crazy. Like you talk about not knowing, like when I started this aviation career, what you were going to be exposed to, just all kinds of stuff I never thought I'd be exposed to. That was like very varsity level type
Yeah.
flying and stuff.
Yeah. Wow, that's
Hmm.
man, that's impressive. That's crazy. You go
That's
from
great.
flying combat in Afghanistan to now flying in the water in America, and that's crazy. What
Yes.
is
Yeah.
what is one of the most memorable moments in your Army career?
Like my dad giving me my first salute, that was pretty good. Like
Yeah.
he pinned me at the commissioning ceremony and gave me my first salute. I can't really, it doesn't really compare to anything else that I can really think of. That was a big one. Oh, here's a really good one. My wife, when we were in Afghanistan, my wife had hired a photographer um, for my R&R trip. Like I left in December of 2007, like you said. Well, I didn't have my R&R trip till October of 2008, so I'd been gone for 10 and a half months. And this photographer captured my homecoming from me coming off the plane down the tarmac with my three girls, and my youngest, of which Mia, like when I left her, she wasn't even walking or talking, and
Yeah.
then she was doing both when I came back. That was probably the highlight of my Army career, was that
Wow.
R&R reunion, because it had been the longest separation that we had as a family.
Wow.
So that was a big one.
Man,
Yeah,
that's deep. I can just imagine the joy. She got a picture of that, right? Yeah,
multiple pictures.
I can just imagine the joy and the flood of emotion it brings to you every time you look at that picture, man. Because
Yeah,
you see so much joy in that picture, but a lot of people, if they look at it, they'll just see the happy family, right? but they don't
Mhm.
realize that at that moment, so much separation and pain behind that picture that's what caused all that joy in that picture during the moment. So man,
Right.
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
What
that
do
was a
you
good one.
what do you think currently where you're at in life? How do you think the Army and the Coast Guard shaped you to handle what you're dealing with in life right now with the, being a real estate agent and the demands of your job right now?
I would say the number one thing is probably perspective. The perspective that on the problems that I have, not to diminish the problems, but the perspective that I have is that the problems that I'm dealing with, although they're financial, they're not life and death problems, and
Yeah.
it's not family separation problems. It's not you know I still have the general, as a parent, I don't think we'll ever not have the worry over our kids, even if they are young adults. But I will say that I think that the military has helped me put some things into perspective that if I didn't have that exposure or that experience, that some of the things that would normally stress out somebody else, I'm not necessarily stressed by. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have stress. I definitely have stress,
Yeah.
but I have to pause and I have to kind of put it in perspective and
Oh
see
yeah.
how I can affect that. And a lot of the things that I'm learning is like if I can't change something, then I can't waste the energy on worrying about it.
So
Like
true.
if I can change something or if I can help something, then I try to put my energy and focus onto the things that I can change.
Yep.
Because the things that I can't change, mentally for me, it's draining to think
Mhm.
about something that I can't affect at all.
Correct.
You know.
Man, that's very deep. What advice would you give that young person or somebody that's, struggling right now, thinking that they can't get through and things are
Hmm.
looking down in the dump? What advice would you give that individual?
Well, number one, I would have to say you are not alone. You are not alone. There are millions of servicemen and women that are, like, I think there's a total of 1.7 total million GWAT, and Gulf War, like they call them Gulf War era veterans that are going through something that's similar. Not obviously not everybody doesn't know your situation, you do, but there are a ton of people that have the same type of experiences that you need to talk to. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't need to be a professional counselor, but there is a ton of resources out there that if you need somebody to chat with, that exists. So that would be my number one, um, baseline to anybody that might be having a hard time. And number two, I would say for me, um, having having a faith in faith is different for everybody.
Right.
I'm learning even to this day, faith can look in a whole different host of ways. But having a faith in something and other than yourself, and especially in other people, faith in other people sometimes is lost.
Mhm.
So, in whatever source it is that you believe in, my belief is in God, and I believe that my faith in God has gotten me through a lot of things that maybe I wouldn't have been able to make it through. But I don't probably publicly profess that enough, but there's not a reason why I shouldn't. But my faith in God and my foundation as a Christian is what has made me who I am today, and I take a lot of comfort in that. And so one of the things I try to do daily is have quiet time with God,
Mm.
and I try to read my Bible as often as
Yeah.
I can. I can do a better job of that. I think we all can if you're a person of faith. But I find a lot of hope in that, and those are the two things that I would say to anybody that might be struggling and might need something or someone,
Yeah.
to work through issues.
That's wonderful, man. And I agree with you on both of those. Um I lean on God every time I have a hard time. I'm dealing with tough times now myself. In combat, always look up, man. Look up to the sky and just, pray. And like you said, we all have our different relationships. So another question. How
Yeah.
how do you define success? So Sam's sitting on his recliner behind you. one night on a Sunday by yourself. How would you define success for Sam? Like, what does that look like?
Mm. You know, if you'd have asked me that a long time ago, I think that it would have probably had um, to sound something like making X amount of dollars, and having X amount of vacations, or maybe having the house paid off or something like that. And I'll be honest with you, Jason, I think first of all, the older that we get,
Yeah.
I think the more defined it becomes that the things that we have, the money that we have, the comforts that we have are not going to be what we're asking for on our deathbed. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be like, oh, I wish I would have gone to, wherever. It's the relationships that we
Mm.
have with the people that we care about, and that is our close family and friends. So I try to remember that and live by that. It's hard for when we're in the middle of, trying to get a deal done or trying to work on something, or, we're just living day to day and we have things we got to do for a house that we live in. And it's easy to sometimes lose sight of that. But I do try to keep in mind, like, when and where I can put my focused effort on family. I try to do that, and a lot of that, as our family starts to grow and they don't all live under our roof, as you're well aware of, you got to be intentional about when and where you have that visitation and those
Yep.
touch points.
Yep.
A good example uh, for 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 me is, I'll give you two examples. One is, I'll give you three. So one is, um, my wife and I both have our own kind of like schedules, whether it's her work, my work, uh, jobs, home chores she's got to do, home chores I got to do. But what I think is important is that we take time and just pause and be like, hey, let's go to breakfast.
Yeah.
You
That's
know, like,
huge.
you talked about scheduling that in our calendar. Like, I don't think that that would work for she and I to like schedule it, but
Yeah.
whenever we can, it's like, hey, let's go to breakfast, or hey, let's go get a cinnamon roll, or hey, let's go have lunch. Like, to do that is important,
Mm-hmm.
just to put the phone away and spend some time. Two, I have a 17-year-old that lives here who won't live here by this time next year. And so any chance I can get to just like, hey, let's go get an ice cream.
Yeah.
Hey, what are you doing? You want to come with me to do this? Hey, let's go do that. Like, that's really on me, because she's not going to come to me and be like, hey, let's go do whatever. Like,
Yep.
she is willing to go spend time with me when I ask. So I got to be intentional about that. And the third thing is I have two other grown daughters that don't live here. One of them I get to see. She's coming home tonight for us to go to New York City together, just the two of us, which I'm super looking forward to.
Yeah. That's
And
awesome,
that's
man.
something that yeah, we're going to remember that
Yeah.
forever, right? So that's
Yep.
going to be like a really, really fun trip, because that's not something that we do every day. And it's definitely not something that we'll do multiple times in our lifetime. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure that I put some focused effort and energy into the relationships that are important to me, because I think that that is what matters at the end of the day.
Definitely. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So as we wrap things up, first I want to tell you thank you for your time. All right. Uh, you're ever in the Nashville area, come see me, man. I want to see your face again. And
Yeah.
I want to I want you
Yeah.
to know, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, my relationship with you is very profound, and I thank you for everything and the pivotal role you played in my life, and I'll be forever grateful for that. Um, looking where you're at right now in life, if you had to go back and talk to 18-year-old Sam, what's the one thing you would tell him?
Uh, to do hard things. Um, so I do believe that, looking back at my younger self, I think that I probably tried to avoid doing hard things
Mm,
sometimes. Yeah, I made it through the army and I made it through the Coast Guard. That doesn't mean I was able to do everything uh, uh, in the best possible way. Like I think I did my best at the time,
Yeah.
but looking back, I feel like, especially as somebody who knows that hard things shape character and
Mm.
they are things that help us grow, to do hard things now. I don't know that I'd be able to go back and change anything that I was able to do that shaped us as a family or shaped me as a military officer or an aviator or anything like that. But not to be afraid of hard things. And I think that in some cases I tried to do things that were hard, um, as easy as I could, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. I
No,
don't know
that
if that makes sense.
that makes a lot of sense. So I want to give you the floor right now. I want you to speak about anything you want the audience to know about, like where we could find you, your real estate connections, uh, anything,
Sure.
biggest thing. Take these last few minutes to pretty much put yourself out there so everybody could find you and lean on you. I know there's veterans that could use your help with the organizations we mentioned earlier. So the floor is yours.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So first and foremost, I want to thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. This platform that you are working on. This doesn't happen without it being hard, right? We talked about two hard things. You had to figure out a bunch of stuff, and you had to go out and make contacts and ask people and put yourself out there to get rejected and all that kind of stuff. Thank you very much for thinking of me, and thank you for the opportunity to share a part of my story, which is a part of your story today with your listeners. Um, Couple of things. The organizations that I'm involved in are local organizations. The things I wanted to give a shout out to is anybody in the Savannah area. If you're a runner or if you're into supporting veterans and first responders, there is a run called hashtag Honor Mark. If you were to just Google hashtag Honor Mark, it is a um, it is an organization named after my late neighbor whose wife um, started a run with his firehouses. Mark Hummeldorf was a firefighter and a Purple Heart Marine veteran of Iraq and in the Battle of Fallujah, and passed away in a car accident about 6 years ago. And we've been having this run that raises money for veterans and first responders. And it's been an honor to be a part of the hashtag Honor Mark organization. The second thing I would say is if you are recently separating or retiring veteran, or if you're just ETSing or you're about to, if you're going through like TAPS, the Transition Assistance Program, there is a nonprofit in Richmond Hill based called Combat Boots to Boardroom. It is specifically designed free of charge for providing veterans resources to get what it is that you need for helping your transition, whether that's, maybe you need money for a suit, or maybe you need to get your writing skills squared away, or you need just connections. Like that is a resource for connection. So Combat Boots to Boardroom. Those are the two big nonprofits that I just wanted to give a shout out. As far I'm involved in multiple other organizations. Those uh, are more military affiliated, like Quad A, all that kind of stuff. But those two organizations are near and dear to my heart. I just wanted to give a shout out to there. And if anybody, like you said, is looking to potentially might need any kind of services in the Savannah area. And I say Savannah area because I work within probably about a 1 hour radius of the Savannah area. And you don't know if you are in a position to purchase or a position to sell, or if you need to rent. I can help with anything: purchase, sell, rent, invest. That I'm available on all the platforms: Instagram, uh, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. I got all that stuff. So
And what's your handle for all those?
I got on Instagram, it's Sam Pemberton Realtor. Facebook, you can just look up Sam Pemberton. I have a realtor page as well as my personal, so it's up to you which one you would rather follow or like or subscribe to. On LinkedIn, I'm Sam Pemberton 65, as in MH65. And then YouTube is Sam Pemberton RE, at Sam Pemberton RE. It's a YouTube channel there. Thanks for letting me plug all that stuff.
Hey, no problem, Sam. And once again, thank you. And if you need anything, you have my phone number, so just call me. All right. So
Will do.
you take care, and I appreciate everything you're doing. All right. Keep up the good work. Veterans, soldiers, if you need some mentoring, advice, hit Sam up. This guy, I've been looking up to him as a leader for, man, I don't even want to say how long, because 2008 was a long time ago, but reach out to him. He'll pour into you. All right. But
Thanks, Jason.
I appreciate everything. This is Heroes Have Wings, and we're out for this episode. Thank you for tuning in to Heroes Have Wings, where we honor the extraordinary stories of grit, sacrifice, and resilience. Remember, every hero's journey starts with a single step, so take yours today. If you love this episode, like, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep pushing limits, breaking barriers, and living your truth. I'm your host, Jason Santiago, and this is Heroes Have Wings, where legends rise.